Everybody, welcome to the EMC Community Roundtable. I'm here with Sue Tabbal-Yamaguchi. That's how you say your last name?
Yamaguchi, yeah. Sue Tabbal-Yamaguchi.
And we have a special guest, Joey Azout from Alexandra Farms. We all know who he is. And he's going to talk to us about the most beautiful roses grown in Colombia from his farm, Alexandra Farms.
I can attest to that. The most beautiful roses in this entire world comes from Alexandra Farms. I'm so excited. Welcome, Joey.
We can hear you, Joe. Something happened to your sound.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for being fans of Alexandra Farms roses and for giving me this time here in this show.
Who's not gonna be fans? My God.
You know, we are fans of yours, Joey, seriously, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
So Joey, what is Alexandra Farms?
So in 2004, my daughter Alexandra was born. And in 2005, we started a test farm growing garden roses for the cut flower industry in Bogota, Colombia. It was very difficult in the beginning for us because we didn't know how to grow them, how to post-harvest them, how to pack them, or how to sell them. Garden roses for the retail business or for the cut flower business was new. There was a farm in California that cut some stems and shipped them nationwide in the US. But nobody was exporting these from Colombia, Ecuador, Kenya, Ethiopia, anywhere. They were always locally grown or grown in California and shipped throughout the states. So we really didn't know that at the time. And what we wanted to do was grow a crop that was different than all of these roses that were being bred for purely production value, because they were very productive or because they could withstand a trip from Quito to Moscow. It seemed that that's what the growers were looking for. That's what breeders were breeding for. And we had roses. I don't know if you remember Rafaela. Rafaela was this huge dark pink rose that did nothing in the vase. It had no fragrance. It was just big and that's it. So we wanted to bring back the romance. We wanted to bring back those shapes and fragrances and flowers that actually perform in the vase. So we went about testing hundreds of varieties of garden roses that had those shapes and those textures and those colors. And that's how we started testing varieties for at Alexandra Farms. We went to some European breeders. We tested some David Austin varieties, but we were still learning what this market was all about, because it ended up being a very wedding and event market when we thought it would be a specialty rose market. So we were growing all kinds of colors for all kinds of seasons. But as we learned, we realized that our flowers were mostly for event and wedding work, and the colors were wedding and event colors. And it took us a couple of years to learn that. And those mistakes were very expensive because we would peak for Valentine's Day, for example, and nobody wanted to buy white garden roses at Valentine's Day. There was just no market for it. So we started learning our lesson. And once we realized that that was so important, we started dedicating ourselves to finding wedding roses with wedding colors and charisma and shape and fragrance. And we did. We now have 60 varieties of garden roses for the cut flower market growing, and they've all been selected because they have the vase life and because they have the fragrance or the shape or the color.
I'm just curious, what was like one of the few first roses that you were growing and testing when you started the farm?
Well, we first started with some Tantau varieties. There was one called Chippendale. Chippendale was a beautiful orange-red rose that opened up like an English garden rose with a cup shape. It was so beautiful, but it didn't have a wedding color. So we had it for the first couple of years and we had to let it go. And then we had a white called Mitos, which was an ivory white. It wasn't very white. It was more of a creamy ivory color. It didn't have fragrance and it didn't open, but it was the only white or close to white garden rose we could find. So we planted that. So we've bettered as we've evolved, and the varieties have evolved. The varieties that we have are better in terms of shape, color, longevity than they were initially. There's only a couple that we still have that we started off with, which are the Piano series, maybe Baroness and Maria Theresia. Those are the only, it's a handful of the 60 that we started off with.
Wow. I'm curious to
you-
see that Chippendale.
And where do you normally export to? Which countries?
Well, the US is our largest market. It's probably 65 to 70% of our sales. Our second market was Russia until they decided to invade the Ukraine. So now they're about fourth or fifth. They still continue to buy, but not as much. And Holland is our second market at this point. And Holland really means all of Europe, because the flowers that are imported into Holland are exported into France, England, Germany, Belgium, and all the Western European countries. But the US is our major market.
When we search your website and we look for all the products and all the colors and all the textures, we see like 4 different areas. So we have the Alexandra Farms, and then there's another section which is the is the David Austin, and then we have the Princess, and then what is the difference?
Well, there's a difference between what a breeder does and what a farm does, and sometimes people confuse the two. So I wanted to go back and tell you that breeders are the companies that are looking to breed new, better varieties. They're the ones that are making mixes between a male and a female rose to create a new a variety, and they do hundreds of crosses a year. And they select varieties because of some characteristic they're looking for: productivity, color, shape, vase life, something. And then they propagate that and they market it. That's a breeder. And these categories are organized by breeders. So let me start with our most important breeder of all, who's David Austin. He is a Englishman who passed away in 2018, but his son, David Austin Jr., runs the company now. And they're located in central England. And David Austin Sr. was a nurseryman who fell in love with the shapes of the roses he had in his garden, but didn't really like the shape of the roses that were coming into his nursery trade. And he said, I want both things. I want the productivity and the longevity and the pest resilience. There's a word there. Resistance.
Resistance. Yeah.
The pest resistance that I can get from these new roses, but I want them with the old-fashioned garden shapes. And he started doing some breeding, and 7 or 8 or 10 years later, he started producing and marketing varieties that had this English cup shape. As a matter of fact, the English garden roses comes from the David Austin breeds. He created that category. English garden roses, David Austin did. These were all shrubs for your garden. And since the 80s or 60s or 70s, he's had licensees in every country in the world for producing the roses that he bred and selling them in nurseries in the big green pot with the David Austin logo in gold letters. And he's been doing it so long that this brand is known by the end consumer as a fine garden rose product. In 2000 or a little before, they decided that they would breed varieties special for the cut flower market, thinking that the same idea of an old-fashioned shape with new modern vase life and productivity would appeal to the market. And in 2005, they launched their products by selecting 5 farms in the world to grow their varieties. 1 in Kenya, a couple in Ecuador, 1 in Colombia, and 1 in California. We weren't selected because we were late to the party in 2006. We tested some of their varieties and we were interested in growing them, but we didn't get a chance until the Colombian farm went bust in 2010. And then we were given the license as the Colombian garden rose growers with the most experience. And that's when we started David Austin. So David Austin has this line that's very exclusive. It's only grown by 4 farms in the world, bred in England, and consistent with this cup shape, where the rose petals are shorter in the center than on the sides, which is the opposite of a spiral rose, which are so common in the regular exportable roses, where you have the center petals are very tall and the outer petals are a little bit shorter, so you get a spiral shape. These are the opposite of that. And you can see a rose like Juliet or Patience, which many people are familiar with, have that cup shape. So that's our probably our most important line. And there's a dozen varieties there, although David is really keen on expanding the amount of varieties. And we have some amazing new ones in the pipeline. All right, so that's that. And are the length of my answers good? Do you want them to be shorter or longer?
No, we're
No.
learning. A lot
They're
of people
fine.
don't know.
Yeah.
Because I can talk a lot about these issues. All right, so we'll go on to our next brand, which is a very cool brand. It's called Wabara. Wabara means fine rose in Japanese, and they are the David Austin breeder of Japan. That has a brand name in Japan, not worldwide like David Austin does, but certainly in Japan. And the way we met them was in 2010. Our second largest export market after the US was Japan. And so we were traveling there to visit customers and participate in trade shows once a year. And the first trade show I went to, I had a little extra time and I walked around and I found many varieties of roses bred in Japan that looked a lot like the ones that we want to grow. They had either a cup shape or they were very flat when they opened. They had performance in the vase. So I approached these breeders and a couple of things came out of that. One is the Wabara brand, which is bred by Ken Kunieda in Japan. And then several other breeders we put into a basket called Princess Garden Roses. Mr. Imai Nurseries in Hiroshima, and another company called Marchand. And so the Princess Garden Rose line is several Japanese breeders, and the Wabara is one major Japanese breeder. And that's how those collection works. But what they all have in common is that they're amazing roses, right? They're not similar to David Austin because David Austin is unique in his shapes, but they're in some other way extraordinary. The Wabaras, for example, we have a variety called Sumuri, which is a light blush, a pink that is just ruffled and rebellious, and it's just a beautiful garden rose. And then Wabara also has the Miyabi, which are the ones that open flat, completely flat. They're just beautiful. And we have now a brown one called Miyabi Brown. It's more of a tan than a brown, but it opens up all the way and it just really fills a space, because when these roses open, they're the size of my hand.
Yeah.
In the Princess, we've got a great white with fragrance. We have a great peach with fragrance called the white is Miyuki, which means first snow. The Princess Maya is the peach, which has a fragrance. We have Aiko, which is a peach colored also, but it's a peony shape. All of these varieties we've spent many years selecting them, and they're just absolutely great in that they meet all the requirements for the roses that we grow: performance, fragrance, shape, everything.
Wow.
Did I miss one? Yes, the Alexandra Farms collection is all the other breeders in the world that have roses that are somehow special, garden roses that are somehow special. They have a shape or a fragrance, and that includes the German breeders, Dutch breeders. We have Danish breeders. We have French, Spanish, breeders from all over the world, really, that have these varieties that we think are so beautiful. It's the largest collection, Alexandra Farms. It has maybe 36 varieties of our
Wow.
60.
I have the names right there on the screen. Apple Aster, Land Spray, Bridal Piano. There's so many.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, the Princess line is named by female names of people in Japan. And Japan names aren't based on the Bible. They're more based on nature. So our white is Miyuki, and it means first snow. And I think that that's a great way of selling this rose, because it's the first snow. It's not any kind of snow. It's not old snow. It's the first snow of the season. And Maya's name is great because it means night rain. So it's not afternoon rain or morning rain. It's the rain that when you're in bed. It's night rain, and I think that expresses a little bit about the variety itself.
That makes
They all
sense.
have names like that. Hitomi is beautiful history, and Midori means green. Pinku means pink, as you might have figured out.
And that's the one that's on the, you have your picture there. That's the
Yeah.
pink.
And
Mhm.
it's interesting that you picked that one because it's a very controversial pick of ours.
It's my favorite.
Many designers really like it, and when Jorge came down to the farm, he was all over it. But the wholesale trade and the import trade don't identify it as something with potential because it's unlike anything that they've sold before.
Really?
So
I
we
love
need
it.
designers to pull it through the chain in order for wholesalers to realize that there's a market for it. And
Oh,
Midori is also a beautiful green. Do you like Midori, Jorge?
Yes.
Midori is a green that's a little bit bigger than the pinku. And it's chartreuse, and it combines so well with all the other colors, but it's also controversial. None of the importers have liked it very much, although most of the designers have loved it.
yeah. I've seen
like-
the Midori, and I saw the pinku at the symposium. I
Right.
like them both, but
That's right.
yeah. I'm
That's
gonna be
right.
asking for it so that way they can have it more in the market
Yes.
and
Yes.
available for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's our jobs to promote the roses too. If we use it and we
Yeah.
take photos and we show them, more people are going to ask, "What is that? That's beautiful." I'm like,
You know,
for instance,
one thing I
pink, I
noticed,
love the texture and I love the
yeah,
color.
yeah, it's the
It's
texture of that
unusual.
rose. It's very unique.
Yeah, like those little patches, like all the color. It looks like it's a rose, but it's not a rose. Like it's
Right.
I don't know. It's beautiful.
It feels like straw flower. Did you notice that? When you
Yeah,
touched it, it felt like straw
yeah.
flower. So it didn't
It's not
feel like rose.
it's not delicate. It lasts a really long time in the vase.
It has the
Very.
paper, like the paper feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping that a lot of people will see it and get excited about it and order it because it is such a fabulous rose. It's absolutely gorgeous.
I like unusual flowers. Like when you see the rose with the dark green center, it looks like it's from a different planet. I love those flowers. But
Yeah.
some people are like, oh no, it's too weird for me. But try it. Just look at the potential of that flower. What it can do for your designs.
Right.
Because some people are just used to do just the color and the color because of the color, because it's romantic, but try to do something else. Play with the texture, play with the size. That's
Right.
actually something we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So when customers are asking for your roses, what they look for, the beauty, the color, the fragrance, the texture, the size.
In different markets, I think that the answer is different. In Japan, when we first started selecting breeders there, we found that brides sometimes choose the roses based on the fragrance. So florists have these buckets of fragrances, well, little perfume bottles of fragrances that they let the bride smell, and depending on which fragrance they like, they choose the rose that smells like that. And they develop these fragrances with the pharmaceutical and the beauty care products companies in Japan. I thought that was amazing. But if I were to say what most markets look for, it's really the color. The color is the boss. I would like it to be fragrance, or I would like it to be the beautiful shape, but mostly it's color. I think it's color because people don't realize that they have so many choices within the same color. I mean, we have a white rose like White O'Hara, which is huge. It opens up large. It has a fragrance, but it's not even close to what Leonora looks like, which is another white that opens up with a cup shape. And then we have White Cloud, and then we have Alabaster. We have so many white options. If people knew that they had all of these options, maybe they would select based on shape or fragrance. Miyuki is really fragrant, but White Cloud is not fragrant at all. But it's mostly color.
So it's basically the visual impact the color
Right.
is going to give.
Right. And initially, Jorge, we had a really big discussion at the farm as to whether we should give preference to varieties that had a fragrance when we were selecting. So if a variety was nice, but it didn't have a fragrance, discard it. And if a variety wasn't so nice, but it did have a fragrance, approve it. And it was a controversy among our salespeople, myself, the production people. We didn't know which was more important. And finally, the conclusion was, if it's a beautiful rose in a great color, take it. If it has a fragrance, wonderful. But if it doesn't, it'll still probably be a success.
Yeah, well, it's something funny, like when you're designing or you're selling flowers to any person, the first thing they do, no matter what flower they take, they go and they smell it. And a lot of times, like flowers that don't even have a fragrance, but it's like something that we always do. So when they smell the garden roses, they go like they can't believe it because it's so amazing. So that's one of the
And also Jorge, I think that part of the reason why color is so important is because you can't smell a picture, you can't smell a video on Instagram. Things don't smell.
Yeah.
Right. So they're making their selections based on Pinterest and Instagram, and nowhere can you tell if something is fragrant or not. So in the end, it's a characteristic that isn't communicable as easily.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you have a peach rose, you're gonna think about a peach, the fruit, and immediately your memory is going to take you to how the peach smells.
Yeah.
So it's good that the colors are related to different things that we work with or we see every day. Okay, so that answered the question. Colors are the number one. So how can we use garden roses not just for weddings and
Well, that's a great topic to talk about, Jorge, because I've been in the business 25 years and I've seen how difficult it is for retail florists to compete out in the market. You've got the supermarkets and the big box stores selling dozens of roses for less than it costs a retailer to buy it. It's very hard for florists to compete, and customers are, they're mean about it. They'll go to a flower shop and they'll say, oh, you want $60 for that dozen? I can get it down the street for 12. So you have to differentiate yourself, because no florist is going to be able to buy that inexpensive, and the logistics. It's just they have to differentiate themselves with design work and with the products they use. The more sophisticated, more beautiful products, extraordinary, uncommon products, and the same with their designs. And garden roses are a great tool to do that, because a dozen garden roses in a vase do not look like a dozen regular roses in a vase. They open up, many have a fragrance, they have a texture and colors that others don't. So we really urge customers to use our garden roses for everyday work. And of course, the first remark or response is, wait, but they're so expensive. And although garden roses are more expensive than regular roses, in the winter months, when there are no weddings in the United States, we hold very special pricing programs where it's almost half the price we sell them in the summer. And we go to our wholesalers and our importers and ask them to tell the retailer, listen, get your hands on some garden roses during the winter when they're not so expensive, and use them in your everyday work. You'll become familiar with them. You'll see if your customers like them enough to pay the small difference in price in the winter months. And maybe you'll use them in the summer when they're a bit more expensive. And that's worked really well. The second argument the florist says is, oh, but I can't take too many of them. Well, we have a special program where they can take a 48-pack box through their wholesaler that they decide what varieties go inside. And they can change the varieties every so often. So they can say, I want, the Miyuki and the Maya and the Aiko in the beginning. And then they change, what, the Miyuki isn't selling so well, so I'm just going to go with Maya and Pinku. But have the 4 bunches in their stores week in, week out for the entire winter period, get to know them, get to see the reaction of their customers on them. And that's something that every wholesale florist in the US should be able to get into this program. So all they have to do is ask their wholesaler, do you have the Alexandra Farms Winter Special program? And if they don't, please have the wholesaler call us. We'd be happy to explain it.
That's like good news for us in Hawaii, because in Hawaii, we are doing events year round. But, I do use a lot of the garden roses and I get them from Alexandra. We do get the Alexandra varieties, and coming from Colombia to Hawaii, I can tell you that they are always in perfect condition. Always.
How about that?
I don't know how it happens, but it's in perfect condition. But, the other ways that I've actually been using the garden roses is not just in my weddings, but a lot of my couples, like the guys, they are sending anniversary flowers to their wives. And I have clients that every year they'll send flowers, and they always send they want the same flowers that we used in their wedding. So it's always special to have that and use it for an anniversary. The other ways that I've used it is believe it or not, is in funeral work, because the people that really appreciate the garden rose, they love it so much that it was special to the person that passed, and they want to use it. They want it as a memory. So it brings back so much memories, these garden roses, and the fragrance, the colors, this, everything about it, that they want it to be able to, even on their, when they pass, they want to use it. So that's how I've been able to use it, like here in Hawaii, because it is so special and we appreciate it here. But yeah, for us here, that's how we use it.
I think it's wonderful. And one of the good things about the garden roses right now is that you don't have to buy a pack of 24 or 25, because you can get now the packs of 12. So you can play with different colors. You can have more roses to use in different colors and show to your customers. And the other thing is that if you have a retail store, look at the size of the roses. So you don't have to have an arrangement packed with roses. But what you're going to use is a few roses that are going to be the focal point of that arrangement. So
Right.
It's going to open, it's going to have that color, the fragrance, the texture. That's where you're going to display. And then you're going to use all the flowers to complement that. But what you want to showcase is the rose, the romantic feeling that the rose gives to you. That's
Yeah.
another way to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the performance in the vase of our roses has always been an important characteristic that we select for, because it really differentiates itself from regular roses. So you've got something like Miyabi and Miyabi Brown that open up completely flat. I mentioned them. Those varieties are so remarkable and different from the rest that if you put 3 in an arrangement, they fill up the space of a dozen regular roses. Then we have things like Romantic Antique, which is a cabbage-shaped rose,
Yes.
right? And it's so big and it opens so big that it fills up the space. You'd only need 3 to fill up the space that you would use 6 roses for. And well, Waihara and Pikuhara are also very large roses. So and not only large, but that they bloom in the vase. It's really kind of an interactive relationship that you have when you put a dozen roses in your house, because on Monday they look a certain way, on Tuesday they're shaped differently, on Wednesday they're different, on Thursday and Friday. So you have a whole week's worth of viewing it different. When they just sit there for 14 days looking the same, it's not as much fun as getting that 10-day period where they're actually blooming for you.
Yeah.
And that's key in our selection process, the performance in the vase.
Yeah,
I
just
know
seeing
that,
the transition.
you're right.
Yeah.
That transition, when I got the Romantic Antique, I swear when it first came in, I was like, oh, okay, it's budded. But when it finally opened, you're like, wow. I mean, you see the difference, the quality. You definitely see the difference. It's not an ordinary rose like you can get at a supermarket. It's definitely much higher, and you appreciate it because it does last longer in the vase, right?
What's interesting about how they perform is that when you first get a rose like alabaster and you see this small head and you think, oh my God, what am I going to use this with? It's not meaningful. But then when you realize how it will bloom in the vase, you realize that if you're going to do an event with alabaster, you cannot use it when it first came in. You need to put it in water 3 or 4 days so that in the event they're at their maximum glory and their maximum space. When you're using them for everyday arrangements, then sure, you want to use it in a middle point of cut so that they open up at the customer's house. But for events, please use them as open as possible. If you've seen our Instagram or our Facebook page, we just had an arc built in one of our stands in Holland for a trade show that we had. And the flowers were completely open on day 1. And they needed to remain completely open all the way until day 4. And they did in foam. And you'll see these pictures and you'll see the size of these roses. It's remarkable
Yeah.
how when they're full, they fill spaces.
Yeah, I can say that with my events, when the people take home the centerpieces, I get messages back saying, you know, those roses are still alive.
Wow.
That after it's been outside in the sun, you know, and then at night they take it home, and you're thinking, okay, it's not going to last, but I always have compliments that it's still alive. They don't want
That's
to throw
great.
it away.
Well, you're
Which is,
processing the flowers correct too, because
yeah,
that's
yeah.
something else that we as designers, we need to know how these beautiful roses need to be processed when we get it.
Right. And
It's
you know,
like you-
when you get the box from Alexandra, they actually give you a little flyer of
the
how to
instructions, yeah.
the instructions of how to take care of those roses. And it goes step by step. And they also give you like food packets, you know, the food packets for the flowers. Yeah, they come there as well too. So they really take care of you from the time you order to the time you process, and then you'll see the results when you use it in your events or any special occasion. Definitely.
Well, if there's anybody that's listening or an EMC member or non, that would like to learn more about our collections and the care and handling and the rose variety names, there's a program that we set up called the Alexandra Farm Certified Designer Program, where Holly Chapel and I got together because, you know, we had so much information to give out and we didn't know the best way to do it. And Holly's business changed since she started using garden roses in her events. She says that it made her, it kind of defined who she is, and she's a super successful wedding florist. So we got together and I talk about whether very similar to stuff that we've talked about here, what the categories, what the collections are, where they came from, what a breeder is. And then she talks about how to design with them. And then we both talk about the care and handling of them. And that's available for, I think EMC program would have a special price, but it's also available to the public at the list price. And you can get to it through our website. And Tomas and I have talked about a way of promoting it because it makes every florist better. Because they learn how to handle garden roses, but how to handle roses in general, because it's the same concepts.
Right. Right. So, how often do you breed or are looking for new varieties of roses?
All the time. For one thing, I'm very paranoid, and I hate to think that some other farm is going to get a great variety before we do. So we make a big effort to test as many varieties as we can from every breeder we work with. So we contact them 2 or 3 times a year, see what they have. The selections that we make to test from the breeders aren't the regular showroom selections, because those are the ones that other growers get that want commercial greenhouse garden roses. We want the garden roses. So it's a bit of a different, we have to really caress them in order for them to give us things that work for us, because we're not a big customer of theirs. We're a specialty customer of theirs. So we're trying them all the time. Right now we have at least 250. And I think Jorge saw them in his most recent trip. Tell us about that. Did you enjoy that part of the trip?
That was amazing. And selecting the roses was like a dream come true for any person, because we did a lot of roses that day, right? We're like checking, we're like, okay, we had to decide what's good on this one, what do you think about the color, what's the size, the petal count, all that. It was amazing.
We have over 200 varieties at any one time growing at the farm for tests. And during the trip that Jorge was on, we were able to have, I mean, there must have been 100 different rose varieties for everybody to check out and look. And as a grower, I can't tell you how important it is to get the designer's feedback, because importers and wholesalers have great feedback, but designers are what really pulls in the market. For example, we had a bunch of brown varieties 10 years ago that we discarded because we didn't realize. I said, you know, who's going to want a brown rose? It looks no, it looks like silk or something. It doesn't look real. And it turns out that we were totally mistaken. And designers have reached out for these colors, and now maybe 30% of our plants are in the sand and nude colors. It was so important. And if we hadn't had contacted the designers, I don't think we would have gotten in time.
Yeah, those colors are like
Same with the
now
pinkus
trends.
and the Midori, the pink and the green spray roses. We would have eradicated it had not been for Jorge and you and everybody's telling, all the designers telling us that they're so beautiful, because importers don't want to have anything to do with it.
Wow. That sounds, so I know that EMC had gone to your farm in Colombia, and I believe that we had like the older varieties that we got to look at and choose and see which ones. But yeah, definitely, I think we're gonna have to go and visit your farm again.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
It
It
is
really
fun.
is like a dream come true. It's like a candy
Yeah.
store. You have all of these options, and we bring in a vase and another vase and another vase and another
Oh, yeah.
vase, and some of them are absolutely gorgeous. Some of them I kind of don't show because they just didn't turn out very nice. But we still got to look at 100 different varieties.
I think with more than that.
More,
I'm pretty sure this picture is one of those roses, and it was about
yes, it is.
this
It's a
big.
test.
Yeah, it was huge.
Oh, and Sue, a test like this, that if Jorge saw this variety in Bogota and he told us, Joey, this is great, you need to grow it, it would take us about 3 years to get it to market. Because we start off with 30 plants that have to become 60, that have to become 120, that have to become,
Yeah.
240, 500, until we have 6,000, which is a commercial amount. It takes us 3 or 4 years.
So from the time that a rose is selected to produce that much, we won't see it until another 3 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's already been at our farm a couple of years, and the breeders had it for a couple of years before that. So the whole process takes 10 years.
Wow. So this particular rose, what is it called?
It doesn't have a name. It's PG 4434-1.
Yeah.
Can you remember those numbers?
No, I made it up. It's
Well,
something like
absolutely
that.
stunning, but you say it's really huge, right? And with color trends going on now, I mean, a lot of these colors are so popular. So imagine, and when they can get their hands on it, I mean, you're just going to be selling them off the shelves, I think, just like how the browns are.
I hope so. This would be launched probably 2024, if not 2025.
Wow. That's another couple years. I can't
Yeah.
wait.
Have you thought about maybe selling the name of like a rose name to somebody that is
Well,
famous?
actually, we have a David Austin rose called Effie, that when we sell it in China, we have to call it Rose d'Amour, because a Chinese jewelry chain store owner went to David Austin and bought the name of that variety when it's sold in China. So yes, Jorge, you can pay a breeder to get your name on the rose. As a matter of fact, some of the princess breeders have allowed us to name their roses. So if you give me the right amount of cash, Jorge, we can call the name a rose Jorge Uribe.
What about Sue?
For Sue, it would be free. For Jorge, it'll cost him.
I think it would be better for a rose than my name.
Wow, well, that's good to know that you can actually get your name on a rose. That's exciting.
Well, yes.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you already.
There's one other thing that I want to talk about that I think is really important.
Okay.
In Europe especially, but in the States also, we're very concerned with the environment and the social aspects of growing roses, right? And Colombia and Ecuador years ago had a bad name. That wasn't exactly accurate, but what I can tell you is that today, most farms are Flor Verde, and we are Flor Verde. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Flor Verde is a certificate that the Association of Colombian Growers developed. It has a third-party certification company come and verify that we fulfill the requirements of Flor Verde. And those are both environmental and social. Environmental issues include the use of rainwater, that we don't use the pesticides. We have an integrated pest management system. And we've developed all kinds of technologies for those to reduce the use of pesticides and reduce the use of fertilizations. And then the social part as well, where, you know, they make sure that we pay the employees the full wage. We pay the extra, in Colombia, we pay time and a half for overtime. If it's done at night, even if it isn't more than 40 hours a week, things like that, that we give them the right tools to be able to do their job. And we have the highest level of the Florida certification. We also just got carbon neutral certification from Carbon One World, a United Nations agency that certifies farms and of all kinds as carbon neutral. And we have a business alliance against contraband as well. So those are our 3 certificates, but that was fast. What I most like about what our farm does socially is not certified. And I'd like to talk about it.
Okay.
You see, 30 years ago in Colombia, the Savannah of Bogota, where all the growers are, used to be a potato and cattle area. You didn't have much other businesses there, and most of the jobs were going to men. So the men took care of the cattle and the men took care of the potatoes, and women were unemployed. They were at home. And in our culture, unfortunately, there's a lot of machismo, and some of these men would drink their payroll at the bars, and they would slap their wives around when they got home sometimes. But you would walk into these towns, Sue, and you would have a bar, a house of ill repute, another bar, and a pool place where they would play pool. And that was the demographics of when the flower companies came along. The only available labor were women, and so we hired them. And nowadays, I think we hire over 80 or 60,000 women as a flower industry as a whole. We have 300 women. Most of them are heads of household, and we've given them a salary which has empowered them to take control of their lives. If their husbands weren't treating them right, they can kick them out and continue to survive. They don't need their independent. And that, I think, is my most remarkable social success story. Not my certificate of employability, not the certificate of Carbon World, but empowering these women to take control of their lives and own their destiny.
Yeah, now the towns around the farm, you go through downtown in these stores, everywhere's not just bars or a place to play pool.
Thank you, Jorge. You finished my story for me. Now you go to a town and you've got a hairdresser, you've got a dress store, you've got a toys for kids store, and that's the big difference. Thank you, Jorge. I forgot about that part.
I have a question before I forget. From all the roses, which one is the rose that everybody wants all the time? The favorite rose?
It's Juliet.
Yeah, you're holding it right there.
So let me ask you, what is your favorite?
It's like asking me if I have a favorite child.
Yeah.
I love some because of their fragrance. I love some because of their story. There's one variety, I'll tell you a story about a couple of varieties. In the south of France, I have the tough job of going to the south of France to find varieties to test, right? It's a very difficult job, my job. And as I was touring the greenhouses of Mayand, I found a beautiful rose that was creeping on the side of a greenhouse. And I said, I'd like to test that rose in Colombia. And they said, no, that rose is a creeper. It doesn't have the stem thickness or the head size for you to grow it as a cut flower. Forget it. And of course, being obtuse and stubborn that I am, I said, no, we want to test it. We tested it, and it's called Sabrina. It is a beautiful rose that we actually have commercially grown now for 3 or 4 years. It opens up flat with a button center. It's delicate. It's beautiful. It's a light pink. It's gorgeous. That rose would have to be one of my favorites because it was against all odds that it would be a commercial success. Yeah. And then the other one is Maya. And the story of Maya is, remember that peach rose called Oceana? Maybe you're too young to remember.
Yes, no, I remember Oceana. Yes.
Yes.
Oceana, it was a peach rose that had a fragrance, but it
It was
opened up very quickly.
flooded, but then it did open, and
Right.
it opened beautifully. Yes.
Right. That was one of the first roses that had the characteristics that we like so much, right? Fragrance and aperture, so performance in the vase. Well, in my trip to visit breeders in Japan, I had the chance of going to the Imai nursery, which is in Hiroshima. So as the owner, Mr. Imai, picked me up in the train station, the bullet train station, and drove me up the hill to a beautiful nursery on the top of a mountain overlooking the Hiroshima harbor, right? It's a postcard kind of place. And in there, we found this peach rose that opens up all the way, is very fragrant, has a terrific vase life, a terrific shelf life, and it's called Princess Maya. So those two have stories related to them, and that makes them special in my book, although they're all my favorites.
Wow.
Thank
That's
you.
nice to know. Really nice to know. Well, all of my favorites is actually anything from Alexandra, and I can really tell you that.
Well, one thing that we're very careful of is not having bad varieties in our line, because we don't want them to tarnish the rest of our name, right? So even if there's a variety out there that people want, but it's not a very well, there's a couple of varieties that are family of the Yves Piaget rose,
Right.
but they don't have the vase life, they don't have the shelf life, we don't grow them because people have asked us to, but they would just tarnish our name because they don't have the characteristics that we absolutely require. So you can buy any one of our varieties and be confident that you'll have a good experience.
Yes, and I can attest to that, definitely.
Me too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, my customer loves your roses, and I can tell you from compliments and time again, whenever we use them for our events, for our memorial services, for our anniversaries, and even the special birthdays. I mean, they really appreciate all of the roses because of all the work that you actually put into it, you know? Now knowing that with all the certifications that you do, and now especially how you're empowering women, it makes Alexandra Farms even more special.
You met when we did that design special in Colombia with EMC. A lot of the employees came out to look at the butterfly releasing event. They
Yes.
were thrilled to see what their work could become when it gets into the hands of designers. So you met these girls and you've seen them with their happy faces.
Yeah, we actually, because they're always working in a factory or they're working in the field. But I remember like some of the butterflies would be flying, and they got a chance to like have the butterflies land on them, and I think they were so happy. It was
That's right.
It was such a beautiful, empowering event that, you know, for anyone that always works with something, but they don't see the potential of what they're working with to
Right.
see can create or how it's
Right.
built.
Right.
I think it gives them much more appreciation of the quality and the reason why they're always caring, from the time that's in the farm, the time that they process, the time that they're grading all of the rose stems, and when they're packing it, where they're boxing it, and then they're shipping it. I think they have a greater appreciation for what you as the owner are giving them and giving to the world. I think that's so powerful.
That's exactly right. And we try to show lots of pictures of brides getting married all over the world. Remember, we had this big portrait of a Japanese girl with a bridal bouquet full of the white roses. And we show it to them so they can see how they bring happiness to the world by growing these beautiful garden roses.
Right. Well, I'm hoping that I'm going to be making a really big bouquet, and I'm going to send it to you so you can show them.
Wonderful. Yes, I'd love that. Thank you.
I think something very important about the Alexandra Farms, when I walked and saw people working, I think they treat the farm like it's their own. No matter what you're doing, it's like a big family, and everybody's so friendly. Everybody wants to, everybody take care of their job. It's not a job. It's something they enjoy. And when you talk to them, you can see everybody's like admire you, and I don't know. It's something wonderful. It's like
they
a
know
big
that
family.
They know that they're growing very special roses as opposed to some of the other farms around us. So they're very proud that they work at Alexandra, where we do these very high-end roses.
You know what I noticed too on the packaging, they have their name on it, and I believe it's the person that actually packed your roses.
Yeah,
Yes.
every
Always look
bunch
forward.
every bunch has the name of the person who made the bunch, and
Right.
it's great because first the person who makes the bunch, is recognized by the market for her work, right? So she's proud of that. It also makes sure that she makes a really nice bunch because her name is on it. Now, originally we had a lot of problems because some of the customers thought that their name was the name of the variety. So we would get requests for Maria Conchita Alonso a variety or Juanita Perez variety. And so now it says very large letters, this bunch was handmade by, so that nobody thinks it's a variety name anymore.
But I think that's a great idea because it gives them more of that appreciation.
Right.
And just knowing how you appreciate all of the people that do this, to make this happen. Gosh, really, Alexandra Farms, to me now, I have such a greater, like, I have chicken skin just knowing like all the things that you're doing to make sure the environment is taken care of, but how you're empowering women, because women, I think, well, and guys too, I know guys appreciate it, but women, because like that's Garden Roses is my favorite, is my ultimate favorite. But yeah, thank you so much.
It's my
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
And all
Yeah.
those things are good business,
It
as
is.
well as being good to the environment and good to the people. It's good business. We have lower turnover than most other farms, which means we don't have to train as many times the people, and they do a better job because they've been doing it for a longer period of time. So all of these things are wonderful and heartwarming, but they're also good business decisions.
No, gosh, if I ever retire, I'm gonna come work for Alexandra.
You're welcome anytime.
Oh, wow, Jorge, this has been such an inspiring talk with you, Joey. I mean,
Well, thank you.
you agree, Jorge?
Of course, it's always nice talking to Joey because he
It's
tells
such an-
you there's so many stories that you can stay talking to him for weeks nonstop.
It's always
Drinking Colombian coffee.
I'm
It's
trying to
always-
restrain myself, actually.
and it's always a pleasure for me to work with designers first that are fans like you guys. I mean, it's really makes me feel very nice, but also because we're a team and we create beauty together. My beauty isn't half as beautiful without your beauty, and together it's more than 1 + 1. So thank you for working with me and having this close relationship where we can continue to create beauty.
Well, your roses inspire us to create. So we get inspired by the color, by the fragrance, by everything that the flowers offers to
And
us.
your